This is the Leadership in Insurance podcast, brought to you by FinPro Search Partners.
Insurance companies are businesses and they need to look for the long term and be sustainable.
We went from 0 to 1 and now it's going from 1 to 100.
Insurance as a concept, as a kind of service, is brilliant. The execution is what we're looking at now.
I think the companies that are going to succeed are the ones that are going to understand and master the art of intent.
When we talk about innovation, we lean too heavily to think about technology and we don't think about creating a culture of innovation. I think innovation is essentially continuous improvement of existing processes and platforms and product.
Right? It's got to be easy. It's got to be seamless. Good morning and welcome to the Leadership and Insurance podcast. I'm your host, Alex Bond, and I'm very lucky today to be joined by Ines, who is CEO of Gaia. How are you?
Excellent. What about you?
All right, thank you. All right. I would moan, but it's not great podcasting material if we do that. So we'll start on a more positive note. Really pleasing to have you on. We've done some group stuff before. You've been involved in some of the We Are Short Tech Women initiatives, but it's a pleasure to have you on this podcast because we've wanted to do this for a number of years now. Big supporters of the Gaia business. But before we go ploughing in, I think it's a really interesting business. So it'd be lovely if you could introduce yourself and obviously Gaia.
Of course. So as you said, I'm Ines, CEO of Gaia. I've been here since the very first day, actually. In particular, I've been involved in insurance especially. And so what we do at Gaia is basically our mission is to give anyone who wants to have a family a chance to try. And for those that need fertility treatment to have a family, the biggest hurdle usually is financial. So we built a suite of products to be the best way to pay for fertility care. And the best way means first and foremost paying for outcome, which is a child. That's what people want. Making it more affordable, more transparent, and always supported throughout the journey. And so we use data to build models to predict outcomes that are personalized to our members and their clinics. Our members pay us for the outcome, sometimes over many years to make it more manageable. And we take on the risk and clinics get paid regardless of outcome, basically. Part of it is insurance, as you know, especially our very first product, but it's much more than that.
Yeah, I think that was some of the pushback when you were sort of earlier stages was we were going, we want to get you on the podcast. And you were like, we're not an insurtech.
We're not an insurtech.
I'm like, in our eyes you are, but I totally understand that you're not. And I took some time to be converted, but I'm a convert. Why do you think that distinction is important? Is it because the focus on the outcome is different?
Yeah, it's just like people like to put companies in boxes, and we have so many boxes that it doesn't make sense anymore. The insurtech, you can say fintech, you can say health tech, you can say basically anything. We help people to have family. It's basically what you need to say. Family tech could be interesting.
Yeah. I tell you, there's a funny little side note. Is obviously doing what I do, running a search firm for insurtech. Specific businesses. My former partner runs a health tech search business, and we would fight over this. Like we were like, well, in our world, it's this, and it's that thing of going like, are these boxes even that helpful? You know, I don't really think they are. I mean, because we say insurtech because it's easy to say, but realistically, we work with innovation teams within big insurers. We work with kind of big insurers if they're doing a sort of innovation style project, and then we work with businesses that would define themselves differently but may have an insurance panel. So you know, I think we're lazy and also we're self-serving. So it's kind of, we put you in the box that suits our world, I think. Talking about the insurance journey, I think something that you said that really resonated with me and I thought was really interesting was the previous conversation said not knowing about insurance is best. What did you mean by that?
I get to say that in front of a lot of insurance people and every time they feel like a bit shocked. No, it is best. I'm going to specify in particular, like it's not knowing insurance to build a novel product that is best. And I tell this story a lot because I'm a bit of an extreme example. The story I like to say is that when I joined Nader, he gave me kind of the mission to go run in the world and get us capacity from insurers. And I did not know what a premium was. And I was like, really, like, I never bought insurance. I genuinely didn't know. And the only thing I knew very well is the problem. I understood the problem we had to solve. understood the math very well. And I was so convinced that people needed it. And so when you laser focus on this, you can take any no and all the biases from insurers that kind of say no at the start. And we took so much at the start. You just take it on board and you're like, okay, what do you need? And we'll make it work. Basically, because you are focused on the problem first and foremost. And then when you think about it, like it does make sense in hindsight. The underlying reason why insurers are afraid is because they first and foremost build their products on data, and not just data that we use like outcome data, treatment data, but claims data. But by definition, if you want to build a new product, you don't have claim data. It's the very, very first insurance product. So you can't build it on this. So they need to kind of take a leap of faith. And the second problem we saw is that when it regards to consumer, they're very, very afraid. It's a different type of risk. It's not the financial risk. It's the conduct risk. But they want to know every single scenario and everything that could go wrong. And so these are the hurdles, both on the data side, on the conduct side, that we had to kind of work through. And I think not knowing about insurance gave us the resilience that we wouldn't have had if we knew about the industry, if we had the bias of what most insurance tell us. And they have the same reflex. They're kind of trained for that. And so it's good that this partnership works in the end, but it needs a lot of resilience that not having a background in insurance helps.
Yeah, I can understand that. I was actually showing a deck the other day, and I questioned that about myself. So it was an insurance product for the recruitment industry specifically, and without sharing too much because it's quite an early stage deck, and I was quite negative about it as a proposition. And I actually said, I thought, one, I think, am I too close to insurance? And then secondly, am I too close to the recruitment industry? So I kind of immediately shot it down rather than looking for reasons where it would work. But I do think where sometimes that does come across is that there's good insurance products that we could create that are good for consumers, that are not necessarily good for insurance companies, as in writing that business profitably. Was that the challenge, is meeting those two things in the middle, was trying to find a way to profitably underwrite what you were trying to do?
Exactly. I think for me, the math did work. Like we could take that risk profitably. So that was obvious. Then it's more like we don't have the full data of claims. Are you happy to take that risk based on other data that we have? That's the first one on profitability aspect. But most of the time, I think on the math, they can be more flexible. It's the conduct topic that was interesting, where they had just had to go quite deep dive and cover these two risks that are very different.
That spirit, expanding that spirit out. Do you think that generally is a good, your background, you've been exposed to lots of entrepreneurs. Do you think that is a sort of trait or a quality that kind of people need? Because I'm always really fascinated by people when they go with a pitch, particularly if you're going for funding and you're early stage. How much do you shave off your idea, evolve your idea by that feedback, and how much do you hold on to? I don't know.
I think it is a very good point. It is something you can generalize in the sense that you need to focus mostly and understand deeply the problem. That is what, as an entrepreneur, you need to understand incredibly well. And then insurance is just a tool. It could have been anything else. I'm solving a problem. I want to increase access to IVF. And you can use any tool to go and solve that problem. And that's the most important thing. And this is why journalists in general do very good entrepreneurs. They need to understand the problem. That's usually where they come from. Sometimes they've lived that themselves. That's Ladder in particular for us. And in that, when I say entrepreneur, like it's also a big name, right? Like it's that period of 0 to 1, which can be very long. You can say 0 to like 10. I don't know what number is right, but it's basically figuring out the product market fit. So you understand the problem. You're figuring out what people want to buy. The go-to market, you're also figuring out like new geographies, figuring out new products. So anything that is in early stages that is kind of risky, needs a lot of iteration. A journalist or someone that doesn't have biases of certain tools or certain industry is very, very valuable, because then you don't you're shamelessly iterating. You can be laser focused on what works and what doesn't, rather than optimizing in what you know. There's another advantage as well, is that in early stages you can't really afford that many experts in the room. I think on one side it's quite expensive. you don't want one FTE for everything, so kind of someone that can embrace different parts of the business is helpful, like in terms of investment. But it's also much easier to make decision across different function when you have less people in the room, single person that can really understand the problem and do a lot of things. It's kind of this hands-on journalist. So that's really for for the 0 to 1. After, I think generous is still a thing. Like you need to surround yourself by people that know the industry, know their function incredibly well. It's a different type of, I think, challenge. You almost go, the way I think about it is like, in football, you go from being the captain, the midfield captain, like you have like these box-to-box midfield player. Basically, they know very well defense, they know very well attack, but they don't do it. They're just here to support their team. That's your early stage. You're on the pitch with everyone. And then when you figure it out and it's very old machine, you kind of go to the bench. You're the coach. And that's like, you don't like, a lot of excellent coach are not football players themselves, right? Or they were like not professional athletes at all. So very often driving success is not necessarily knowing things themselves, something that you kind of learn in the building of a company in general.
That makes me feel safe about things. I genuinely, I was talking about.
I'm constantly in doubt, you know.
Yeah.
I'm like, I wake up, I'm like, I really don't know anything, so I create these stories to feel better about myself.
No, I think it's a really good example, and funnily enough, bringing the football in, a friend of mine is a very successful entrepreneur, and we were at the football the other night. We went to the Champions League game, and it's a big send off for him, and going back to Australia, and we were talking about this very thing, and he was saying, success in my business will be as quickly as possible I become less relevant. Like the less I'm involved in anything kind of actual day to day, and more kind of figurehead stuff and just coaching from the bench, the better. And he was giving me quite a hard time, actually. He was basically saying, "You're not doing it fast enough. Get on with it.
Get out of the weeds." Yes.
Yeah. But it was really true. I mean, it was really true. And your job becomes replacing yourself. I would echo is I have a really good 0 to 1 skill set. I like that. I'm happy in chaos, and finding those people is really difficult. But as you scale and mature, and probably that's where we are. And actually, I told you some growth plans we've got just before we're recording. That's what we're doing now. Now we're on that journey. So I see it in our sort of client cluster as well.
I feel like it's a question that everyone needs to ask themselves, even as the company grows. Like, are you ready to take the bench? It's
I'm so ready.
Like, no, it's like it bench like looks negative. I'm talking about the coach, right? But like it is a different experience, and your experience as a player does help. It's not necessarily necessary, really, but it is valuable.
Yeah. In fact, I mean, I made this point. I was lucky enough to do a talk at ITC last week, and one of the points, there was a sports quote, and I'm going to butcher it now, but essentially it was like, no one says you have like a man of the match performance on the weekend and then immediately goes, do you want to come into the boardroom? Because some people are terrible managers but are really good ICs, and we're really bad generally in all industries. Insurance, we do this, like see this a lot in the broking industry. Some of the broking side of the house is like people are brilliant brokers, and then they get these leadership roles, and it's a lot in my industry. People are really good performers in this, and then we make them leaders, and skill sets are not the same. So I think the hard thing as you grow as an entrepreneur, and what I see in some of the businesses, is that actually the skill set quite limited of that person. And if they bench themselves, they're like, yeah, but I'm only good at that bit and I don't have a generalist skill set. But they're so over-indexed in the thing that they're doing, and it's typically sales or product or engineering, that they can't leave that thing alone. And it's a real challenge. I wanted to bring us back to kind of product. Regulated markets are such a challenge. So like, and we talked about how challenging it is to iterate in a regulated market. How do you do that?
You don't. Sadly, you don't. You do not iterate. At least not at the speed that I wish we could iterate. You can't even compare it to any other fields in tech. And what we did to counter this, and because like you understand, basically you need to design the product and kind of get your typically capacity with insurance before even being able to sell it. So if every time you need to go back and validate with regulators or anything your products, it takes a long time. And the way we went about this is basically building incredible partnerships with our insurance. And I want to like really give a shout out to our partner, Chaucer, Adam and Nasra, and previously Haley. They've been incredible in really understanding our problem. Again, they almost had like kind of an entrepreneurial journey with us, understand our journey and being so committed to solve the problem with us, which means that they bring to the table every single person that needs kind of to validate any iteration. And so what that means is instead of going and for 6 months into a process to try and understand what can we change in our product together, or basically what happens is we can do that quite easily because every single person at Chaucer is kind of on the same page with us. So if you have very strong partnerships, I think you can iterate better and faster. They know the regulation very well and we know our problem very well. But it is really generally not, especially in the UK, an easy task.
Yeah, that journey to product market fit, and we've touched on it a few times. That in that net new product environment, is that how it gets done? It's that partnership piece? Is that kind of what drives it over the line? Because it's a unique journey. I mean, lots of people are on here with products that we see, and we get people on the podcast, and they're doing versions of an existing product. But you're talking about this net new product space. Yeah, is it the partnerships that kind of make it successful?
Yeah, it's a partnership. It's the work that you do on your side with your customers that we call our members. And then it's how do you very fast go back and forth between what you learn and how you change your product. And I mean, I have so many examples to give you where we could spend hours on this, but we've iterated several times on our first product, and like we're cooking many more now. And so I can give you like an example that is a couple of examples. One of them is a very good illustration of how we had to design our very first product for the insurers almost, because basically what we did is we would cover what we call 6 rounds of IVF, because the data that we had basically gave us prediction for 6 rounds. And a round of IVF can be 2 things. It can be either a fresh round, which is in the UK 10K basically, or a frozen one, which is 2K, so much cheaper. But you don't know which one you're going to go through depending on the outcomes every time you go through IVF, to simplify. And so because we covered for 6 rounds, what happened is some of our members would come and say, like, the worst that could happen in my journey would be 6 times 10K, so 6K to pay you back. That's way too much. Even if on paper it's 1% of the time, it never happens, it's very unlikely, etc. And so what happened is we designed something that mathematically fits the math, the underlying model, not to take any risk from that data. And we ended up with a product that did not fit with either the risk that people wanted to take, even if it was 1%, and also, at least not everyone, but also what they understood were cycles of IVF. And so in our second iteration with our insurers, basically we moved from rounds to what we call cycle, which was something that people understood very well, that doctors used. We did a couple of approximation of the math that was totally fine, especially after a year of like testing and having many members. It kind of made sense to both parties. That's one example. And even now in like our iteration of like further products, one of the things we really strive for is transparency, right? And being transparent means telling people how much their journey is going to be to a child. But not everyone is ready to hear that. And that means that especially not every clinic, and most clinics don't tell you that because, well, they're not incentivized to tell you how many it might take you to actually be successful. So what we ended up doing is basically giving you this perfect journey that mathematically, again, makes so much sense. And that's what you do if you design before even testing. You come with your approach of what an optimal journey is, but then they compared it with what they see at a clinic, which can be like much less because it's a single round, doesn't need anything, and etc. And so like one of a good metaphor for this is like, you know, in the dieting industry, you see so many like diets that get you the abs in 6 weeks and like, crazy photos. The actual truth is that it will take you 12 months to lose maybe 15 kilos and 12 months to maintain your good habits, and maybe another 12 months to like be really, really sure. So get on with me in your 3-year journey for you to sustainably lose weight. No one is going to buy it. No one. As long as you have fat diets out there, like even if you're like, it's the absolute truth, right? Like no diet work in the end. You always take back the weight. It is the truth, but no one is going to buy this. So what we had to do is kind of restructure the product design according to the psychology of our members so they understand better, so it's more reachable, so we can anchor it, so you can start from what they know and wherever they're projecting their scenario and adapt to them. So you really build a journey starting from where they are. And all this was really learned by talking to our members constantly and really adapt to all of them. And so I think we did, like, of course, find product market fit in many ways with our first products, but the idea was to really become the way to pay. And for this, we had to go fast, learn fast, and then circle back with our insurance fast enough to be able to capture even further and help prospective parents have a families, really.
Yeah. No, it's super important. And just so I'm clear on the distribution model, it's B2B2C via the clinics? Is that the current model?
Yeah, we have two models really. One is directly to consumer, so those are be the one-stop shop for family building. You're searching for starting a family or paying for IVF, and this is where you start, and then you're directed to care by starting with the money. For a lot of people, this is where it starts. But we're also at checkout of clinics, so partnering with clinics to actually sell our products as well. In the US, of course, the employer channel is fundamental. So it's like really a three-way.
Yeah. That's something I wanted to cover just before we close up, because I knew we'd do this. So we've rattled along so nicely that we're sort of probably at the end. So you announced about 4 months ago that, hey there, USA, we're coming for you, essentially. What is the different approach to market, and what's the kind of ambitions there? You actually mentioned, I didn't know that a lot of the leadership team have gone over to the US as well, haven't they, to really commit to that move. So yeah, I'm excited to hear about what you've got planned for there, and how different it is from the kind of the UK market.
Yeah, like lots of the team indeed is either already in the US or we moved, because it is fundamentally the biggest financial pain for sure, and also the biggest market for the problem we're solving. There are some differences. The problem of the journey of IVF is as painful in the UK as it is in the US. So that part and understanding of the problems and the hurdles is very similar. So the fundamental point is common. But an interesting thing that is different is, like, I think first and foremost, you have access to a much larger market at once. Clinics are also much more mature to understand, like, payer options, and even they are faster in moving along. So that's a very interesting thing that we've experienced. And members are also more educated. Insurance, by definition, because they use insurance for everything, every healthcare procedure, and even loans and anything that related to financial products. The different challenges will be, like, on one side, what I mentioned, which is like the channel, the employer channel is much more important. This is how you will give real access to more people, is if you manage to cover more employers. And in terms of regulation, I think it is much more different, and there is more complexity state by state, which makes it very interesting, especially at some borders. Like we launched the very first clinic was in Virginia, but it was closer to Washington, Maryland than any other city. So we had to manage the complexity of cross-border and your commuters. Like, you sell very differently in Connecticut versus New York, and it's so very close, and it's also the same country. So there is this to understand better. And so a creative lawyer, Tom, in our team is really, really helpful. Better than insurance expertise, typically. To be able to explore that. So it comes with the fundamental points are similar, but the go-to-market does change a lot.
Yeah, that's always been the big challenge about the US. We speak to lots of businesses expanding out there, and the kind of state to state thing is fascinatingly complex. We don't get out of bed to make it easy for ourselves. Otherwise, we'd all go, do something boring with our time. Ines, thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast. I wanted to do this a long time. We could do this for hours, but we're big supporters of the business. We're quite close to the Chaucer team as well, and we know how much they got behind you, and still really excited about it. So congratulations on getting launched in the US and success so far, but thanks more than anything for just being a guest on the podcast.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.